Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater. I'm coming to you live from Brooklyn, New York. We're about half an hour outside of Midtown Manhattan. We're in what's called Industrial City here in a very cool industrial loft space, and we are about to visit Fodera to check out some amazing basses, the wood library, how they craft those incredible instruments. So come on inside and let's check it out. So we're here with Jason DeSalvo, one of the partners here at Fodera. I appreciate you sitting down with us.
Absolutely. Mitch, it's great to see you again.
Great to see you as well. You were out to visit us not long ago.
Sure thing.
Yeah, I came out with Matthew Garrison.
Exactly. Yeah. Matt and I came out, a couple months back.
Yeah.
What a facility you guys have there.
Well, I could say the same here. I mean, this is like an old world craft shop, the way you guys have it set up and the craftspeople you have in the back.
Yeah, it is, and it's a wonderful thing. I mean, we feel privileged to be able to do this work, and to be doing it in New York City in this day and age is mind-boggling. Right,
right. We were talking, we were watching Vadim hand-shaping one of the necks with some rasps and some files and things. Where does someone develop the talent to be able to, he works so fast. It's like, oh man, shouldn't you be more careful while you're...
I have watched Vadim or Vinnie take a neck, while he's having a conversation with me, and just vroom, 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 and I'm like, ah, and they're masters. Look, Vadim's from the Ukraine, Vadim Medved. He's been with us for, I think, almost 20 years. And his dad was one of the Ukraine's top builders of violins. Vadim actually started apprenticing for his dad when he was 6. Europe, places like the Ukraine, they have that kind of apprentice system. So you start when you're very young and you apprentice, and you start out doing things that are trivial and menial, and then you build up to making an entire instrument. We've had to kind of recreate that environment here. Obviously the two masters back there are Vinnie Federa and Vadim Medved, but then there's a group of younger people who are training under them in very much the same apprentice type system. We've had people with us back there. Joe Mayer's been with us now since I want to say 2010 or 2011, so that's 6 or 7 years. Emily's been with us 3 or 4 years. So these younger people are gaining the experience over time, and it's an equation, right? You have to get them ready to be the next masters before Vadim and Vinnie say, yeah, we're done. Right. And so that is part of the responsibility that you have when you're trying to build in that old world style, is to develop the next level of talent. Right,
right. It was interesting. If I understand correctly, Emily's actually a sculptor, which makes sense to me, that because she's shaping necks, shaping the bodies and things. I think that's very cool.
So Emily studied here at the Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. She's an artist, sculptor, but a reductive sculptor, right? There's 2 ways to create sculpture. If you're creating it out of clay, it's additive. You're adding material to it. If you're creating it out of metal, machined metal or wood, you're taking material away. So it's a reductive process.
Well, everyone back there watching them, whether it was doing the initial shaping or the sanding, the finish work, obviously they're really talented craftspeople.
Well, thank you. They work really hard at it. They love it. No one here, myself included, you don't do this if you don't love it. It ain't the best way to make money, and it certainly isn't the easiest. But there's something really magical about having trees come into the front door, parts come in boxes, and beautiful finished instruments go out. You know, it's a pretty special process.
Right. And the other half of that equation, if you will, is the materials. And we had a tour of the wood stock that you guys have here. Wow, just some incredible stuff.
That is actually one of the biggest things that I get pleasure out of is buying that stuff. The danger is we have to dovetail it with our accountants who say, you can only spend this much, because left to our own devices, Joey, Vinnie, and me would probably need a space 3 times the size, because you see great wood and you just want to have it. Right. I just had the benefit of coming back from a vacation where I saw some of the places where our wood actually grows. Now, with not purchasing mahogany from Honduras anymore because it's CITES certified, we buy a fair amount of our body mahogany and neck mahogany from plantations on the islands, on the Fiji Islands. And to see the stuff grow in situ and then show the people who grow it and say, yeah, here's what we do with your wood, their faces were like, oh, that's beautiful. Because in Fiji, they're using mahogany for things like doors, 2x4s, and relatively mundane stuff.
Right.
We use it to make instruments, and so they're pretty pretty impressed by that.
We are here with Vinnie Federa, the namesake of the company. Great to see you.
Hi, Mitch. Good to see you too.
It's such a pleasure to be here and seeing the shop and the amazing work you guys are doing.
It's my pleasure to have you guys here.
It is such a treat to see the instruments go from just raw wood all the way to finished amazing instruments. It really is something.
Thank you. Yeah, we feel that way too. Even after all these years, the thrill never goes away. Right. It's a lot of fun.
So you're the principal instrument designer here. You're the man behind all those designs. Take us a little bit through the process of how you design an instrument.
Well, it's changed a little bit from the early days. Initially, when Joey and I started the company, we wanted to offer something that didn't compete with our friends' instruments or what was already on the market. We wanted to try and create our own identity. So we started off with those benchmarks, and that made it a little bit easy. There was room in those days. There weren't too many boutique instruments yet. They were the main manufacturers. Right. So there was a lot of room for young upstart builders like us. Right. Today, it's changed somewhat. I mean, there are so many more types and varieties and so many fine instruments out there that we tend to listen to the clients and see what they'd like to see, what they'd like to have. That steers us towards a new design. Sometimes a new design will come out of nowhere, honestly. Every now and then there'll be just a spark. A thought pops into the head, you know, and it ends up being something cool. But, you know, mostly it's just from absorbing everybody's input.
Right, right. So let's talk a little bit about the tonal aspects of the instruments. And I guess the way I'll ask this question is, I'm a guitar player, and so I'll buy a guitar and it'll be, maybe I think it's a little dark sounding, so I'll put a brighter pickup in it to get to where I want. But you're actually starting from the other end of it. Are you designing toward a particular sound and choosing the components and the woods, or how does that work?
Well, that's part of it, but I guess my approach stems from my early training as a classical guitar builder. I was really lucky early on in my career to study with a wonderful luthier named Thomas Humphrey. And he set me up with some of the basics about acoustics and wood quality and the way wood vibrates and the kind of things acoustic builders know. Right. And when I started building electric basses, I had that knowledge already and applied a lot of it to electric solid body bass building. And that is what still steers me. One important lesson I learned early on is how important the raw materials are. The wood is the primary tone producer, and I always strove to get the very best possible material toward that end. Right. And if that early training, you know, set me on the right path. Many of my friends and contemporaries over the years had different criteria, you know, but that has guided me well through the years. It still does. So knowledge of fine woods and their interactions is key to coming up with these results that we do.
Right. That's very interesting to me. I'm familiar with Humphrey's guitars, and of course the Millennium that he made with the elevated fingerboard and the wedge-shaped body. Very interesting approach. How do you feel as a instrument designer? Do you feel constricted to stay within kind of the traditional kind of things, or how much do you feel free to push into to new areas?
Oh, that's a great question. Actually, I feel very unrestricted. I only stay inside the box when it's required. As recently, where we started making classics that are very retro, and we did that deliberately to meet a very strong demand. Right. But when I'm thinking about a new model or something different, I'm always thinking outside the box. I never stay within traditional margins. So that's another key thing. Always looking at new materials, new processes. I look at completely unrelated things that will sometimes give me a great idea that I can then apply to guitar building. Right. So.
Right, right. Tell us a little bit about your selection of woods and how you find the woods that go into making this one, because you have just a gorgeous library of raw material.
That's tricky, you know. It's fine, really top quality wood is becoming very scarce, and in many cases illegal. Some of the woods are being protected now, and we can't use them easily. We have to have paperwork and special permits to use. So reason now that we are able to procure such nice material goes back, you know, many years of relationships, working with vendors and mills who've come to know us well. They know what we require, and our unfailing stubbornness to only get the best possible material.
Right.
That's really important.
Right, right. I have to wonder, some of the folks here were telling us the stories of spending hours and hours with artists, for example, designing instruments, and you yourself working into the late hours, many nights to match pickups to woods and things. How do you know
As my wife will attest.
Yeah, right. How do you know when it's done? How do you say, oh, there it is, we've gotten there?
Gee, you know, sometimes you really don't. You know, there have been moments where I just stop because I could keep going and changing a shape and adding a different pickup or a different wood, or you could go on and on and on with a design, but sometimes you just have to go with your gut, and instinct says, this looks right, this feels right. Well, let's check it out, you know, and if we build a few and they prove out, then it stays, you know.
Right.
But there's no science, you know, it's not a science, it's a lot of instinct involved.
Right. So when you're sourcing this wood, what do you look for? You see a tree and you say, well, that's going to be a really nice base.
We don't get out to actually look at trees much anymore, largely because we've had 20, 30-year relationships with our suppliers. And over the years, between us going out and them learning about us, we've gotten to the point that they pretty much understand what our needs are. We still reject probably a higher proportion of stuff that they send it back than maybe any other of their customers. Right. By way of example, the last time I went off-site to pick fingerboard material, we went to one of our suppliers who happens to be local, but they supply ebony fingerboards for almost any name for boutique builders that you'd know. And I went there, I sorted through 1,200 fingerboards and left with 200.
Wow.
Right? Now this is already premium grade stuff, but when we sort through that, what we go through, I'm just using fingerboards as an example. I don't look at the fingerboard to start. I hold it up next to my ear and I tap it to see whether or not it's resonant and how the thing responds tonally. I put that in two piles. Acceptable, not acceptable, okay? And there's a cutoff that you just learn based on your own ear where you're like, yeah, this is not gonna make a great fingerboard. Then after that process, say that narrows it down from 1,200 to about 400. Then you go from 400 to 200 by looking at it, and you look at the grain and you say, all right, this has kind of, the grain is not consistent here, there's checking here, this is going to crack, it's going to be dimensionally unstable. Right. You set that aside. So that's fingerboard wood. For body wood, it's very much the same, it's all tonal, right? What's the weight of the wood? Is it too heavy? Is it too light? How does the grain look? Most importantly though, how does it resonate? The only wood that we buy where we look at the way it looks first is the stuff that goes on the tops of the instruments. Okay. That we do the opposite process. Does it look great? And then you tap it and say, okay, does it sound good, right? As opposed to sound first.
Did you always have a great ear for finding those right tones, or is that something you've worked to develop?
I guess, you know, it goes back to the Tom Humphrey days where he showed me how to tap wood and listen for certain resonances and how to tell dead piece from a lively piece. And then I elaborated on that. I absorbed every bit of knowledge I could find about that. But yes.
Right. You know, there are kind of, you mentioned the tapping the woods and the resonance and things, and we've talked with some of the other folks about that as well. There are, of course, two schools of thought on that. Some people feel that the wood really doesn't contribute, it's just pickups and strings, and yeah, and your take is obviously the other end of the spectrum.
Sure. In fact, early on when I used to explain to my customers that the wood quality was really important for tone production, many folks didn't believe it. They didn't think it mattered. It's a solid body instrument. Why does it matter? It's just a slab of wood. It's not a vibrating top with a bridge and all that. Right. But it is very true, of course. We all know now. So, you know, understanding that has always been a great blessing.
One of the unique features of your instruments is a lot of people use quarter sawn necks, and they use you know, graphite reinforcement and things. All that's wonderful, of course, make great instruments. You guys are using a three-piece neck design. What's the advantage of that?
So the way we do our three-piece, if you, and I'm going to grab this one. Which one am I going to grab? This one right here.
Okay.
All right, just to demonstrate. On this, you've got three pieces, right? So you have a quarter sawn centerpiece. That'll always be quarter sawn. These two are cut from the opposite sides of a block, right? So if I have a block that's like this, I'm going to take that piece, cut them, and put them on the opposite side. So when I take them and put them like this, they are essentially quarter sawn, but they're the opposite pieces from the block of wood that they came from. The theory being, if this one wants to move this way, this one pulls it back, and they kind of counteract for each other, which makes, when you glue it together in a three-piece neck, a very dimensionally stable neck, right, without having to use graphite reinforcement. Graphite's great, but it absolutely changes the sound of the instrument. Right. We philosophically, there are two schools of thought. The opposite ends of the spectrum are, you can put plywood and 2x4s together because it's an electric instrument, and it will sound exactly the same as all this exotic wood that we use. My own personal experience and Fodera's ethos is, we're making acoustic instruments that happen to be electrified. And I can tell you, if we played through every one of these basses on the wall behind you without amplification, they sound different, predictably, based on the woods they're built with. So a walnut-bodied bass is always going to sound darker than an ash-bodied bass, which is going to sound different than a mahogany-bodied bass, which will sound different than an alder bass. So for us, picking the woods and the combination of woods is where we start. Then we electrify and amplify them. So.
Right. Right, and you guys actually were in the early days, going back to when the company was founded around 1983 or so, you were doing some pretty innovative things with the electronics as well. Some of the first 5-string pickups and some of those things.
Well, yeah, I think interestingly in the early days, first of all, the whole concept of an active bass was new. You know, the P bass and the jazz bass, which is pretty much where this started, P bass originally, they're passive instruments. They have passive pickups, they have no preamp, right? The whole concept of adding any electronics, which had an active phase, into the preamp, as well as in our early days, we were using a lot of EMG pickups, which are actually active pickups, right? So pickups can be active, and then you can also have an active section within the preamp. Some people confuse them. Right. The only pickups that we use that are active are EMGs. We use them. They actually need battery power to deliver signal from the pickups themselves, because there's a small preamp in the pickup. If your battery goes dead, you have no sound. The rest of the pickups that we use are passive pickups, but our electronics, our preamp, are active. What we always did, though, from the very beginning, is have a passive section of the preamp so that you can turn the active section off, and then it sounds like a true passive instrument. Right. Those of us like me, I'm actually I come more from a vintage mindset. I played a P bass for the first 20 years of my playing life, and then I went over to a jazz bass. So it's important for people with that mindset to be able to have a truly passive instrument. In every Fodera, when you turn the active mode off, as long as you're not playing an EMG pickup bass, and you never would be if you're a vintage aficionado, you're playing a truly passive instrument. Then you turn that on, and you've got obviously bass, mids, and treble, boost, and cut. And the preamps have grown over the years. We're in like our 4th or 5th generation of our preamp. They're now highly customizable with little jumpers that let you change as the user the frequency centers, what the different toggle switches and controls do. It's more customizable than, frankly, you know, I even know how to use. I got to go into Joey and say, Joey, you know. So we have a really nice PDF instruction manual online at www.fodera.com. But as a passive guy, I don't wade in those waters much. Right. But it's good to know the flexibilities there.
Right, absolutely, super versatile, super versatile. So one other thing I wanted to ask you about. My understanding is the company actually started making guitars, and now in the last year or so, you've really kind of jumped back into those waters with both feet. Tell us about that.
So the funny thing is, right, the name is Fodera Guitars. It's not Fodera Basses. And Vinnie Federa, the guy whose last name, and you're going to talk to him, I know, Vinnie's a guitar player. Joey's a bass player. But it just so happens Vinnie was the wood guy and Vinnie was the luthier inside making the instruments, and Joey initially started as the salesperson, and Joey was a professional bass player. So guess which of the two instruments he felt more comfortable going out and pushing? Sure. It was the basses. So we very rapidly got a name for bass, but we've always made guitars. We've made guitars going back, as a matter of fact, Fodera #1 is a guitar. Fodera #2 is a bass. So the very first instrument made was a guitar. We introduced at the NAMM show, because we've only done them as custom one-offs, we never put a lot of effort behind getting the word out about the guitars. As we've grown as a company, a lot of those young, talented people back there happen to play guitar instead of bass. And so to avoid a mutiny, and I'm saying this jokingly, we all have wanted to kind of put some more muscle behind the guitar program, but it took us a period of time to grow the team enough and have them be adept enough at just building the basses. Because remember, up until the year 2009, pretty much this company had 5 or 6 employees. We've tried to grow, but also stay small. And so by definition, we have really curtailed our production and not allowed us to build too many instruments. So only when we got to the point that we felt we had ample additional kind of ability to build some more instruments did we say, okay, let's start allowing some guitars to filter into that. So we released as formal products, if you will, the Imperial guitar and the Emperor guitar at the NAMM show this year. And so yeah, now we are in fact making guitars, and they're gaining some great traction. There's been some amazing reviews of them. Guitar Aficionado and Guitar Player Magazine both gave them raves. I embarrassingly don't play guitar. They seem pretty cool to me, but the guitarists back there seem to love them, and so yeah.
I had a chance to sit down and just strum a few of them here, and boy, they are really, really nice, really special instruments.
Yeah, they're made with the same ethos and mindset that got us our name for basses. I mean, everyone is handcrafted from the ground up. What you don't see is the incredible number of hours that Vinnie and Will and Joe, those are the 3 primary guitar players in the back that are really kind of nuts about this pickup with this wood, with this. They'd cut off for the workday and stay here till the wee hours in the morning, kind of playing through all different combinations, because we wanted to do something that was within the genre that guitarists are used to, but also very Federa. Have our own kind of sense of both playing feel, tonal balance. That's one of the things that all of our instruments are typically known for. Incredible balance throughout the tonal range. How do you get that without being a Me Too product where it's something really Federa? And that took a couple of years of back and forth, multiple iterations, listening to hundreds and hundreds of different electronic combinations, pickup combinations, neck radii, neck feels and shapes, until you just kind of get to the point that the very fanatical guys in the back stop tinkering, and they're like, yeah, I think this is ready. So, yeah.
It's been a dream of mine personally to offer guitars in a more standard manner. And finally, we have a wonderful crew. We have the resources. We have the best team now to make that a reality. So we thought we'd give it a shot and see what comes. So I'm very grateful to have the opportunity.
Yeah, well, I know we've had some into Sweetwater, and I've also had the chance to play a few here today. I'm very impressed. I love the neck joint. Where did the idea come for having that really great access?
Oh, thanks. Yes, we call that the Heelys neck joint. That was developed for the basses, oh gosh, way back in, I guess, late 70s really is when it started. That was one of the features that we incorporated when we started building Fodera basses in 1983. Something that would make the basses a little more accessible for the player, a little more appealing, different. No one else was really doing that back then. So it just allows for better access all the way up the neck, and you don't have a bump, you know, where your thumb goes. It helps when you want to play chords high up on the fingerboard. So, you know, that has sort of become a standard feature of ours. We've been using that continuously for 34 years. So it was just a natural move to add it to the guitars.
Right.
Where possible, you know?
Sure, of course. So I have to ask you, as a guitar player yourself, if you were going to go back to the wood library back there and pick some pieces of wood and make something for yourself, what types of wood would you use to make the instrument?
Oh, that's a tough question. I love everything, you know, but I love a Brazilian rosewood for a fretboard, or ebony, excellent. Mahogany for a neck, mahogany or walnut for a body. And that's for, you know, the classic humbucker type guitar. If it were to be a bolt-on style, I suppose a nice alder body with a maple neck is a good combination.
Right.
These are time-proven,
Sure.
you know, and they create good tones. But again, it's got to be good wood. You got to start with choice material.
Right. We're with Joey Lauricella, one of the founding partners here at Fodera. Appreciate you taking time to sit down with us.
My pleasure.
So I was impressed and blown away that you actually set up and play every instrument before it leaves the shop here.
Yes, I mean, I've over the years I've been like a bounce around guy. I've been working. I work in the back. I work in the front. I've been like a multifaceted. I do a little bit of everything. And as we expanded the business a little and hired some more people and grew a little bit more, I've always been the guy to play the basses. Always been the guy who sits here and makes it before everyone goes out. I have to like make sure I'd like to take it on a gig with me.
Right.
To let it go out, you know, and I have to like it because if I don't like it, I know the customer's not going to like it.
Right. So actually, I understand, if I have the story right, you're a large part of the reason that Fodera really got into the bass market so strongly, given that you were, in the early days, out there actually selling the instruments.
Yeah, because Vinnie, my partner, Vinnie's a guitar player. And we started, I was out there promoting the basses. We became partners, and I was out and I was playing the basses on the gigs. And, you know, it started kind of slow. It started off pretty slow because nobody knew who we were. But as it started to snowball and people started to, really get into the instruments and saw what we were doing, they liked what we were doing, we got so busy making basses that the guitars became like, we call it business Fodera Guitars. But we were primarily a bass company. We were making basses. Not until now did we sort of announce and release come out with two instruments, two guitars that are in our line, that we're real happy about.
Right. So in those days, you were pretty much going to studios and going to the players and instrument in hand and just introducing them to
I would hang out in the club till Marcus Miller or Willie or Anthony Jackson or anybody that I would want to check out the instruments. I would go where they were playing and I would bring one of the instruments down and. I was able to talk bass because I wasn't a threat I wasn't going to try to get a gig. I was trying to show them our instruments.
One of the things that has come out of that are some incredible artist models. Take us through a little bit of the process of how one of those artist models comes to be.
Well, for instance, a guy like a Victor Wooten. We did the first bass we made for him was a Monarch. It was one of our Monarch basses, which he kind of fell in love with the shape and he fell in love with the small body and the way it fit his body. And once he played that bass for a while, he got used to it. There were certain little changes that he might want to make on the instrument. And so we said, oh, look, let's turn it into an artist model. So one time he came in here and he said, he goes, I'm into this yin yang thing. He goes, maybe you guys could put like a little yin yang symbol on the instrument. So me and Vinnie, we started talking about it. We said, we think we could, let's do something. So we conceived the top of the instrument as a yin yang.
Right.
And we built him a fretless. The first yin yang was a fretless bass. And I brought it out to Nashville. He was doing a thing out in Nashville, and I brought the bass out there. And we presented it to him as kind of his first, I said, Vic, how's this as an artist model? And when he opened up the case, he like flipped out. He said, wow. He goes, I can't believe this. Right. And that that's how we developed the whole thing with the concept of the yin yang for Victor.
Right.
You know, other artists like Matt Garrison. When Matt first came up here, he was playing a Yamaha, BB 5000, I think. The one that looked almost like a P bass. Mm-hmm. And so from that moment when he was playing that instrument to where he is now, Matt was always a guy, you know, he was always asking us to try little things. So we created his first, the first Imperial version of the Matt Garrison bass with Matt, you know, Matthew up here, sitting up here. Vinnie made a couple of sketches, and we said Matthew wanted something with a deeper cutaway, extra frets, and different pickup spacing. Right. So we kind of like, we developed Matt's sound with Matt. So it's his model, his artist model became a true artist model. Right. To this day, now we have the mini Matt Garrison. And each variation of that instrument, Matthew was totally involved in it. Mm-hmm. You know, from the, it started out as a 34-inch scale. It went down, we built a 33-inch scale Imperial for Lincoln Goins. And Matt said, oh, wow, that sounds really interesting. Maybe we could do something like that for me, mm-hmm. but a smaller body. Matt always wanted to condense the instrument down so where he wouldn't have to think about the instrument, only about the music. Right. So we built him the Matt Garrison signature model was a 33-inch scale. He totally loved that for a while, mm-hmm. played that. And so also the bodywoods, all the bodywoods we picked out for Matthew, the walnut body, the ebony fingerboard, the pickup spacing, everything Matt was totally 100% on board with that and, you know, involved in that. Right. So then he came up with another idea. You know, he would come up here, his head is always thinking. He goes up and he says, you know, he goes, what do you guys think about making the body even smaller, you know, maybe headless? We says, yeah, why not? You know, we were always up for things. So, you know, again, we started out with, you know, with some, Vinnie's a great artist, so Vinnie started creating some drawings to show Matthew. And that's how we came up with the mini Matt Garrison that we're doing now, which again, Matt's totally involved in it. And it's starting to take off. Right. A lot of guys are loving the idea. You know, with the airlines being a little crazy with the flying, everybody they don't want to put their bass underneath, they want to carry it on board. And with this mini Matt Garrison now, it's a little tiny bass, mm-hmm. and you can take it on board in a small little big. Right, right.
What I like about the artist models is that sometimes when you see a manufacturer make an artist model, it's a cosmetic change here or maybe a pickup change or something. And yours are really developed for that artist. I mean, it really is a unique instrument, whether it's the Anthony Jackson, you know, the contrabasses and things that you've made for him, or as we were talking about with Matt Garrison.
Anthony Jackson, we've been working with Anthony since the early 80s, mm-hmm. before we started Fodera, when we were working for another company, building some instruments for another company. And Anthony, we've been developing his bass for like 30 years. Right. Anthony's had the one he's got now is number 12, I think. And each one got better and better and better. And Anthony always was a little upset that the electric bass wasn't accepted in the classical world. So when we designed that single cutaway for him, we were looking at kind of like a classical kind of look. Right. Which was what he wanted. And that bass has been through about 10 different variations of different woods, different fingerboards, different pickup spacing. The pickups were voiced on that bass, one pickup, passive, no electronics. And everything was, again, Anthony's sitting here for hours and hours and hours and sitting down over dinner, over all day sometimes. And we would constantly develop that instrument, and that's, you know, to make it a true signature model. That's why, you know, he called them prototypes until now. Now the instrument, you know, it's a presentation. The last two were the presentation models. But everybody, you know, everybody in the world would call it a presentation, but to Anthony, no, it's a prototype. We're still developing it, you know. Right. And so Anthony, you know, and all of these guys that we've worked with, you know, with the artist models, they keep you on your toes, you know, and keep you true to your craft. Right. You know, as far as no compromising. And which we, you know, we kind of cherish that. We like that about building instruments. We want to be, you know, tested all the time, and keep quality control is like the most important thing with us.
Right, right. It's so awesome you're able to do that and facilitate the voice of those amazing artists with the amazing instruments. So congratulations. It really is an incredible company you have here. The shop is just gorgeous. The old world craftsmanship. Really a treat to see it.
Thank you so much.
You bet. Appreciate your time. Thank you. Great to see you, Joey. Thanks so much for joining us here at Fodera Guitars in Brooklyn, New York. I hope you enjoyed this tour. It's an amazing combination of incredible craftsmanship, incredible raw materials, incredible design philosophies. Really is a pleasure to check things out. Thank you, Vinnie. Appreciate it.